Link TV, and on DirecTV, channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available at our website in Spanish for any radio station to take in audio form and in transcript form. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Juan.
Well, as we continue on the subject of voter suppression and race, we turn to Queens College political science professor Andrew Hacker. He has an article in the latest issue of the New York Review of Books titled Obama, The Price of Being Black. In it, he writes, quote, obstacles to getting blacks to vote have always been formidable, but this year there will be barriers, some new, some long-standing, that previous campaigns have not had to face.
Andrew Hacker is the author of the best-selling book on race, Two Nations, Black and White, Separate, Hostile, Unequal. He's a frequent contributor to the New York Review of Books, where he's been writing since 1965, joining us here in the Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now! Talk about the voting obstacles. Start to go through the list.
All right, let's take the first. The state of Indiana, several years ago, decided, you know, there's such a thing as voter fraud. Remember Tammany Hall? So, or people voting 5 different times, that kind of thing. Yeah. So therefore, what they said was, we need voter ID, and they decided everybody who came to vote had to show their driver's license with their photo on it, you know, like at the airport. Well, sounds okay until you discover that not everybody is a driver. Well, going to the state of Indiana, which enacted this, I actually went, believe it or not, here's your tax dollars at work. The Federal Highway Administration keeps a record of how many adult residents of every state has a driver's license. And by the way, the court didn't even look at this. And I discovered that in Indiana, 14% of adult residents do not have driver's license. That's 1 in 7. Now, this means they can't vote unless you go to a Bureau of Motor Vehicles office, which in Indiana could be miles away, and fill out a long form to get a non-driver's license. Well, not many people are going to do that. And in particular, not that many black voters are. Many of them are older, they're poorer, and in effect, not in effect, really, what this Indiana law has is what we call disparate impact. It means it doesn't say this is to keep blacks from voting, but it has the greater impact on black voters. The case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and by a vote of 6-3, the Indiana law was allowed to stay in place.
You raise an interesting point in the article. You say that the lawyer who argued before the Supreme Court, when asked about the numbers of people who don't have driver's license, kept saying this word 43,000 inexplicably. When you looked at it, you said 673,926 adult residents of Indiana have no license.
Yes, this really astounded me. You'd think that a lawyer for, you know, in a Supreme Court case would do some research on this. But what troubled me was 2 justices, Stevens, whom we know, and Kennedy, actually voted to sustain Indiana. I think if this 600,000 figure had been used, they might have thought twice about this.
And the other obstacles?
All right. The other obstacle is the one that Jefferson Morley mentioned, but on a broader scale. Here we go to the state of Florida, which is the state you always find when you're looking about voting problems. Under the Help America to Vote Act, very amiably titled statute, the states are now encouraged to rationalize the voting rolls. I prefer the term purge, a bit like laxative. What they did in Florida was they sent out a letter to everybody, not just home foreclosures, everybody on the voting rolls, to say, in effect, hey, is your letter going to be delivered? Why? A lot of people have died, left the state. One understands this. But tremendous number came back, very disproportionately from minorities, black, Hispanic, poorer people. Why? Because particularly in the cities, black families are more likely to move. And by the way, if you move, you don't think to call the voting board and tell them I've got a new address. So all of those people, when they showed up to vote, to look on the list, you're not here anymore, you know, and they're going to have real problems. It's a bit like getting your credit rating restored.
Professor Hacker, on that issue of the driver's licenses, you go well beyond Indiana. You look at Louisiana. You look at Milwaukee alone. Talk about who has driver's licenses, who has the official ID, and who doesn't.
Yes, in the state in Milwaukee, which has a large black population, over half the black residents do not have driver's licenses. You know, those of us who live in Manhattan know that many people in Manhattan don't have a car, but Milwaukee is a kind of, you know, semi-suburban area. They just don't have them, and they can't vote. Well, once this, by the way,
and that's compared with 15% of white adults.
That's right. 15% of white adults don't have licenses. That's in the rest of the state of Wisconsin. In Milwaukee, over half.
I'd like to ask you about this issue of the disparate impact, because this question of trying to control or limit the rolls, the voter rolls, is not new in American history. Obviously, the progressive reform movement in the early 20th century attempted to have municipal reform to prevent immigrant voters, who were then basically the base of the Democratic Party machines in different cities. So there have been battles back and forth throughout American history between those who want to control the size of the electorate and those who want to expand it. To what degree do you see this as more racially motivated or more class-based? It's usually that the poorer sectors of the population are the ones that are being attempted to be restricted.
Well, of course it's class-based. The poorer you are, whether you're white or Asian or whatever race, the less likely you are to have, let's say, a settled address or a driver's license. That we understand. Once again, we get to this disparate impact. And therefore, when I hear, yes, it's poor people, but then I go and look at the racial, if you like, complexion that's here. Now, you don't have your race on a driver's license, but there's been research, particularly as you know, Amy pointed out, in the state of Wisconsin and Milwaukee, to actually find out in racial terms how many people have licenses. That required doing more than just looking at names on licenses. Well, just names, yes.
Talk about the effect in 2002 of the Help America Vote Act, HAVA.
All right. The Help America Vote Act was, in many ways, response to Florida. No more dimple chads, no more butterfly ballots. We understand that. But here we live in the 21st century, and there's this tendency to rationalize, you know, make the system rational. And they felt that voter rolls registrations were messy, cluttered with dead people, people who haven't moved around. Let's clean them up. And you say, hey, that sounds pretty good. Well, you get this question of mail that's returned. But then there was another thing that they did in Florida. They decided, because when you register, you have to give your Social Security number, they would check your registration Social Security number that you gave with, people say Washington, or actually the headquarters of Social Security is in Baltimore. They checked in Baltimore, and Baltimore sent back printout. No, we don't have this person. In fact, 28% of the inquiries made to Social Security kicks back, we don't know this person. You know, this happens with immigrant workers, too. And one reason could be somebody got married, changed their name, got divorced, took back their name. In some families, you actually had two different names. So, but if you didn't pass the Social Security test, off the rolls also in Florida.
You also talk about the whole issue of removing the right to vote for convicted felons and that its impact as well.
Juan, could I just backtrack for a minute about the Florida thing? Like the Indiana case, which went to the Supreme Court, and Indiana, the state, was sustained, so too the Florida business of purging the rolls went to the federal courts. The district court, lower level, said no, Florida had to get rid of this, it had disparate income. It went up to the appeals court, where 2-1, two Republican appointed judges sustained the Florida rules on purging. And there was a, I thought, excellent dissent by a woman, Justice Judge Duckett, the one who pointed out that this was really, the Florida one, going to affect black voters more than others, but she didn't get through.
She noted while black voters made up 13% of the scanned pool, they comprised 26% of those who were purged. While whites were 66% of the pool, they were only 17% of the rejected pool.
Yeah, that's what we mean by disparate impact. I mean, but the two judges, the two on the appeals court, who sustained it, didn't even look at that. They didn't want to. It's kind of, they're saying we're colorblind kind of thing, yeah.
And the situation with convicted felons?
Okay. As everybody who follows this program knows, the United States has more people behind bars than any other country in the world, proportion to population. Russia used to be ahead of us.